In the vast expanse of the galaxy where ancient civilizations measure their worth in millennia and technological marvels that bend reality itself, there exists a simple truth that most species have forgotten. Sometimes the greatest miracles come from the most unlikely hands. Humans are considered the galaxy's mechanics, useful for fixing what's broken, but hardly capable of true innovation. They're the ones you call when your hyperdrive stutters or your life support systems fail. They work with their hands getting dirty in engine rooms while the superior races handle the important matters of diplomacy, science, and war. But what happens when a human mechanic, armed with nothing but spare parts and stubborn determination, accomplishes something that the galaxy's greatest medical minds declared impossible? What happens when word of that miracle reaches the wrong ears, or perhaps the right ones? The answer arrived in the form of 4 massive star cruisers dropping out of hyperspace, their intentions as mysterious as the ancient dragon who could suddenly see the stars for the first time in centuries. Some gifts, it seems, are worth going to war over. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a grease monkey who never meant to change the galaxy. But then again, humans rarely do anything the way other species expect them to. Marcus Chen wiped the synth oil from his hands with a rag that had seen better decades, squinting up at the massive bulk transport that dominated Bay 7 of Nexus Station. The ship was a Korthak freighter, built like a flying brick, and about as elegant, but it hauled cargo reliably across 3 sectors. Today, however, it sat silent and dark, its engines cold and its crew growing more agitated by the hour. "Third hyperdrive coupling in 2 months," muttered Marcus, shaking his head as he climbed down from the ship's maintenance shaft. These Korthak captains pushed their ships too hard. The station's chief mechanic, a grizzled woman named Sarah Hendricks, looked up from her work tablet. "Captain Thresh is breathing down my neck. Says his cargo's time-sensitive, and if we can't fix it by tomorrow, he's filing a complaint with the Transport Guild." Marcus snorted. "Let him complain. Half the parts we need aren't even manufactured anymore. These old Korthak ships are held together by prayer and stubbornness." Nexus Station wasn't much to look at, even by frontier standards. Built into a hollowed-out asteroid in the Kepler Drift, it served as a way station for ships traveling the outer trade routes. The human-run facilities specialized in repairs that other species couldn't or wouldn't handle. The dirty, complicated work that required improvisation and a willingness to get your hands dirty. Marcus had been working the station for 8 years, ever since leaving Earth's overcrowded colonies for the promise of adventure among the stars. What he'd found instead was a lot of malfunctioning equipment, impatient alien customers, and the constant challenge of making obsolete technology work with whatever parts he could scavenge or jury-rig. He was elbow-deep in a particularly stubborn plasma conduit when the commotion started. Voices echoed through the docking bay. Not the usual mix of human cursing and alien complaint languages, but something else, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Sarah's voice crackled through his comm unit. "Marcus, you need to see this. Bay 12. He pulled himself out of the conduit, grabbed his toolkit, and made his way through the station's cramped corridors. Nexus Station had been designed for function over form, with narrow passages that could be sealed in emergencies and thick bulkheads that could withstand micrometeor impacts. The walls were lined with pipes, cables, and maintenance panels that Marcus knew as well as his own apartment. Bay 12 was one of the smaller docking areas usually reserved for personal craft or courier ships. As Marcus approached, he could hear voices speaking in what sounded like ancient Draconic, a language he recognized only because he'd worked on enough archaeological expedition ships to pick up fragments. The crowd that had gathered at the observation window was unusually diverse, even for Nexus Station. He spotted Korthak merchants, a few Zephyrian traders, some human dock workers, and even a crystalline entity that usually kept to itself in the upper levels. All of them were staring down at Bay 12 with expressions ranging from awe to terror. Marcus pushed through the crowd and looked down at what had everyone so captivated. The ship in Bay 12 was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It looked ancient, its hull covered in what appeared to be scales that shifted color in the station's artificial light. Organic curves flowed seamlessly into crystalline structures that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. It was beautiful and alien and somehow wrong, as if it belonged to an earlier age when the galaxy was younger and stranger. "What is it?" Marcus asked Sarah, who had appeared beside him. "Dragon ship," she whispered, her voice tight with something between fear and fascination. "Haven't seen one of those in, hell, I've never seen one. Thought they were myths." As they watched, a section of the ship's hull dilated like an iris, and something emerged that made several of the aliens in the crowd step back. It was humanoid in shape, but clearly not human. Tall, elegant, with skin that seemed to shimmer between scales and flesh. Its movements were fluid, predatory, and when it turned its head to look up at the observation window, Marcus caught a glimpse of eyes that were completely white, unseeing. "Blind," someone murmured in Standard. "The dragon's blind." The figure below moved with careful, practiced steps, one hand trailing along the ship's hull for guidance. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the careful way it navigated, the slight hesitation before each movement. It was clearly adapted to its blindness, but there was something heartbreaking about watching such a graceful being move so carefully through the world. "They're requesting maintenance," Sarah said, checking her tablet. "Standard docking protocols, but they're offering to pay in something called stellar diamonds. Never heard of those." Marcus was still watching the dragon when it happened. The figure below stumbled slightly, its hand missing the guide rail it was reaching for. In that moment of vulnerability, Marcus saw something he recognized, not the alien majesty or the ancient power, but simple human frustration. The slight slump of shoulders, the quick movement to cover embarrassment, the determined straightening of posture. "I'll take the job," Marcus said. Sarah looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. "Marcus, that's a dragon ship. They don't deal with humans. They barely deal with anyone. The few records we have suggest they're older than most of the current galactic civilizations. They're requesting maintenance, right? That's what we do." Marcus shouldered his toolkit. Besides, someone who needs help navigating a simple docking bay probably needs more than just standard repairs. Marcus had worked on ships belonging to dozens of species, but he'd never felt the weight of age and history the way he did approaching the dragon vessel. The ship seemed to hum with barely contained energy, and the closer he got, the more details he could make out. The hull wasn't metal at all, but some kind of biocrystalline composite that seemed to grow rather than being built. Conduits that looked like veins pulsed with soft light beneath a surface that felt warm to the touch. It was like approaching a sleeping giant, and Marcus had to resist the urge to whisper. The dragon was waiting for him at what appeared to be an airlock, though it opened more like a flower blooming than a mechanical door. Up close, the figure was even more impressive. Easily 7 feet tall, with features that combined the best of human and serpentine beauty. Its skin shifted between deep green and gold, and while its eyes were clouded with blindness, they seemed to track his movement by sound alone. When it spoke, its voice was like music played on an instrument made of crystal and starlight. "You are the mechanic?" The words came in accented standard, each syllable perfectly pronounced but carrying harmonics that no human throat could produce. "Marcus Chen," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "What can I help you with?" The dragon tilted its head, and Marcus realized it was listening not just to his words, but to his heartbeat, his breathing. Maybe even his intentions. "I am Zath Rai of the Star-Touched Sept. My ship requires standard maintenance, nothing more." But Marcus could hear the lie in those musical tones. He'd spent years listening to customers minimize their problems, usually right before discovering that their simple repair required rebuilding half their ship's systems. "Mind if I take a look around?" Marcus asked. "Sometimes it's easier to spot problems when you see the whole picture." Zathrai hesitated, then gestured with one elegant hand toward the ship's interior. "As you wish." The walls pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns that reminded Marcus of neural networks or perhaps the circulation system of some vast organism. The corridors curved organically, following no blueprint that any human engineer would recognize, but somehow feeling perfectly natural. Zathray moved through the ship with obvious familiarity, but Marcus noticed the small accommodations everywhere, raised strips along the walls for guidance, surfaces with different textures to indicate direction or function, even what appeared to be subtle sound cues that helped the dragon navigate. "How long have you been blind?" Marcus asked, then immediately regretted the bluntness of the question. "Sorry, that's probably too personal. 407 years by your calendar." Zathrai replied without apparent offense. "A battle wound from the Void Wars. The starfire burned through my optical nerves." Marcus tried to process that number. 400 years of blindness. He couldn't imagine living that long, much less doing it without sight. They reached what appeared to be the ship's central chamber, a spherical room dominated by what Marcus could only describe as a tree made of crystal and light. Its branches spread through the ceiling and walls, pulsing with the same bioluminescence as the rest of the ship. This had to be the ship's brain, its nervous system, maybe even its heart. "This is the core," Zathrai said, approaching the crystal tree with reverence. "It sustains the ship, guides our path through the void, maintains life support." But lately, the dragon trailed off, but Marcus could see the problem. Several of the crystal branches were dim, their light flickering weakly. Others showed stress fractures, and in a few places the organic connections between crystal and ship hull had begun to separate. "The core is dying," Marcus said softly. "Yes." Zathrai's voice carried centuries of sadness. "And with it, my ability to travel the stars. Soon I will be grounded, just another relic of a forgotten age." Marcus circled the core, his engineer's eye cataloging problems and potential solutions. The technology was beyond anything he'd ever seen, but the principles were familiar. Energy transfer, structural support, system integration. The same challenges he dealt with every day, just on a scale and with materials that human science barely understood. "The crystal matrix is overloading," he said, pointing to areas where the light pulsed erratically. "And the bioconnectors are degrading. How often do you maintain this system?" Zathrai was quiet for so long that Marcus wondered if he'd given offense. Finally, the dragon spoke. "My people do not maintain the core. It is grown, not built. When it fails, we accept that our time is ended." "That's—" Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. "That's one way to look at it. But what if there was another way?" Over the next several hours, Marcus explored every inch of the dragon ship, with Zathray serving as guide and translator. The vessel was a marvel of bioengineering, but it was also clearly struggling. Systems that should have regenerated themselves were failing. Connections that should have been self-repairing were breaking down. And throughout it all, the core grew dimmer. It wasn't until Marcus was on his back beneath a crystalline console tracing power flow patterns with a handheld scanner that inspiration struck. "Zathrai," he called out, "these optical pathways in the core, they're not just for ship functions, are they? They also carry sensory data. Before my blindness, I could see through the ship's sensors, feel the movement of stars and planets, perceive the flow of cosmic energies." Marcus rolled out from under the console, his mind racing. "What if I told you that human technology might be able to help? Not to replace your core, I wouldn't know where to start with that, but to supplement it." Zathrai's head turned toward him with sharp interest. "Explain." "Medical optics," Marcus said, climbing to his feet and wiping his hands on his coveralls. "Artificial eyes. We use them for humans who've lost their sight to injury or disease. The technology interfaces directly with the optic nerve, bypassing damaged tissue. You believe such devices could work for my kind?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "Your physiology is different. Your neural patterns probably nothing like ours. But the core's optical pathways, they're already designed to carry visual data. If I could create an interface between human medical optics and your ship's systems," he trailed off, seeing the skepticism in Zathrai's expression. "My people have consulted the greatest medical minds in the galaxy," the dragon said gently. "The crystalline healers, the bio-architects of Vega Prime, even the machine prophets of the synthesist worlds. All have declared my condition beyond their abilities." "Yeah, well," Marcus said with a grin. "They've never met a human grease monkey with too much time on his hands and a junkyard full of spare parts." For the first time since they'd met, Zathray smiled, an expression both alien and strangely familiar. "You would attempt this? Knowing that failure could damage both myself and my ship?" Marcus looked around the ship's central chamber, at the dying core and the centuries of accumulated damage, at the elegant figure who had adapted to blindness with such grace. He thought about his own life. 8 years of fixing other people's problems, of making do with what was available, of proving that human ingenuity could overcome almost any obstacle. "I'll need some time to gather materials and research your physiology," he said, "and I can't promise anything. But if you're willing to trust a human with spare parts and crazy ideas..." Jabadai was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Marcus Chen. Show me what human determination can accomplish." As Marcus left the dragon ship that night, his mind was already racing with possibilities. He had no idea if what he was proposing was even theoretically possible, much less practical. But he'd learned something important during his years on Nexus Station. Sometimes the impossible just meant you hadn't found the right approach yet. He spent the rest of the night in his workshop, surrounded by technical manuals, spare parts, and half-empty coffee containers. By morning, he had the beginnings of a plan that was equal parts genius and madness. What Marcus didn't know was that their conversation had been monitored. Deep in the void between stars, automated listening posts had detected the quantum signature of dragon technology and transmitted that information across the galaxy. By the time Marcus was sketching his first design concepts, ships were already changing course toward Nexus Station. Some carried scientists eager to study dragon biotechnology, others brought military forces determined to claim it, and a few were crewed by beings with much darker intentions. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans decide to help someone, they rarely consider the consequences until it's far too late to change course. 3 days later, Marcus Chen stood in the medical bay of Nexus Station, staring at a collection of components that would have looked like junk to most people. Optical sensors salvaged from a crashed exploration probe, neural interface chips pulled from decommissioned medical equipment, biocompatible conductors liberated from a Zephyrian art installation, and power cells that had once belonged to a mining android. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief medical officer, watched him work with a mixture of fascination and horror. "Marcus, I need to be clear about this. What you're proposing isn't just experimental, it's completely untested. We have no idea how dragon physiology responds to human technology. That's what makes it interesting," Marcus replied, carefully calibrating a neural interface chip. He'd been working almost non-stop since his conversation with Zathray, diving deep into medical databases and xenobiology texts. The more he learned about dragon anatomy, the more convinced he became that his idea might actually work. Dragon neural systems, it turned out, operated on quantum principles that human science was only beginning to understand. Their brains could process information across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously, which explained their legendary ability to perceive cosmic forces that other species could barely detect. But that same complexity meant their optical systems were incredibly sophisticated and potentially compatible with the right kind of technological interface. "The theory is sound," Marcus continued, attaching fiber optic cables to the modified optical sensors. "Dragons process visual data through quantum neural pathways. These sensors can detect the same wavelengths and frequencies, and the interface chips can translate that into signals their brains can interpret." Dr. Vasquez picked up one of the optical sensors, examining the delicate modifications Marcus had made. "And if you're wrong, then Zathray stays blind and I go back to fixing hyperdrive couplings." Marcus shrugged, but his hands remained steady as he worked. "But if I'm right..." He didn't finish the sentence, but they both knew what he meant. If this worked, it would be the first successful cross-species medical implant in galactic history. More than that, it would prove that human ingenuity could accomplish things that the galaxy's greatest civilizations had declared impossible. A soft chime from the medical bay's comm system interrupted their work. Sarah Hendricks's voice crackled through the speakers, tight with concern. "Marcus, we've got a problem. Bay 12 is attracting attention." Marcus looked up from his work. What kind of attention? the kind with sensor arrays and military-grade shields. 3 ships dropped out of hyperspace about an hour ago, and they're all requesting permission to dock. The Crystalline Hegemony, the Synthesis Collective, and something called the Void Hunters that I've never heard of. Dr. Vasquez and Marcus exchanged glances. The Crystalline Hegemony was known throughout the galaxy as master bioengineers, capable of reshaping living tissue at the molecular level. The Synthesis Collective represented the pinnacle of technological achievement, beings who had merged so completely with their machines that the distinction between organic and artificial had become meaningless. The Void Hunters, however, were a mystery. "What do they want?" Marcus asked. "Officially, they're claiming standard diplomatic protocols, requesting permission to observe cultural exchanges between species. Unofficially?" Sarah's voice dropped. "They're all scanning Bay 12 with every sensor they've got. Whatever that dragon ship is, it's got their attention." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He'd been so focused on helping Zathrai that he hadn't considered the wider implications. Dragon technology was legendary throughout the galaxy, but most species believed it to be extinct. The appearance of a functioning dragon ship would be like discovering a working Stargate or a planet-sized computer, the kind of find that started wars. "How long before they dock?" he asked. "Crystalline ship is already locked in. The synthesis vessel is requesting Bay 5. As for the Void Hunters, Sarah paused. "They're not asking permission. They're demanding it." Marcus looked down at his partially completed device. He'd estimated another 6 hours of work before it would be ready for testing. Now he wasn't sure they had 6 minutes. "Keep 'em busy," he said, gathering up his equipment. "File docking protocols, run safety inspections, require customs declarations. I don't care what you have to do. Just buy me some time." Vasquez called as he headed for the door. "That device isn't ready. If you implant it now, if I don't implant it now, we might not get another chance." Marcus paused at the doorway, his toolkit slung over his shoulder. "Zathrai deserves to see the stars again. I'm not going to let politics get in the way of that." The corridor between the medical bay and Bay 12 had never seemed longer. Marcus moved quickly but carefully, aware that his jury-rigged device was the product of 3 sleepless days and more hope than hard science. The optical sensors were delicate, the neural interfaces untested, and the whole assembly held together by determination and surgical tape. When he reached Bay 12, he found Zathrai waiting at the ship's entrance, head tilted in that characteristic listening pose. "The station's energy patterns have changed," the dragon said without preamble. "More ships have arrived." "Yeah, about that," Marcus said, climbing into the ship. "Seems like your presence has attracted some attention. We might want to speed up our timeline." Zathrai led him deeper into the ship, moving with that careful grace that spoke of centuries of practice. "What kind of attention?" "The kind that usually ends with someone demanding to study your technology." Marcus set down his toolkit in the ship's central chamber, where the crystal core continued its slow fade toward darkness. "How do you feel about having house guests?" "My people value their privacy," Zathrai replied, and there was something in that musical voice that suggested house guests would not be welcome. Marcus began unpacking his equipment, laying out the components of his improvised medical device on a bioluminescent surface that served as a workbench. The optical sensors gleamed under the core's fading light, their modified casings reflecting the pulsing patterns of the ship's neural networks. "This is it," he said, holding up the completed assembly. It looked like something a child might build from spare electronics, wires and circuits and sensors connected by a web of fiber optic cables, but Marcus knew that appearances could be deceiving. Some of humanity's greatest innovations had started as collections of spare parts held together by ingenuity. Zathrai approached the device, moving with the cautious grace of someone who had learned not to trust their environment completely. "It seems smaller than I expected." "The best technology usually is," Marcus replied. "The hard part isn't making it big and impressive. The hard part is making it work." He spent the next several minutes explaining how the device would function, describing the way the optical sensors would gather visual data and translate it into quantum signals that Zathrai's brain could process. The dragon listened intently, asking questions that revealed a deep understanding of both biological and technological systems. The interface will connect directly to your ship's optical pathways, Marcus explained, indicating the crystalline conduits that ran along the chamber's walls. Instead of trying to repair your damaged optic nerves, we're going to bypass them entirely. You'll see through the ship's sensors, but the data will be processed by your natural neural patterns. And the risks? Marcus met the dragon's blind gaze honestly. Complete neural rejection is possible. The interface could cause hallucinations, seizures, or permanent brain damage. We're connecting human technology to a dragon nervous system. There's no roadmap for this. Zathrai was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Proceed. The implantation process took nearly 2 hours. Marcus had to work carefully, connecting the device's neural interfaces to the dragon's skull in a procedure that was part surgery and part technical installation. Dr. Vasquez had provided medical supplies and monitoring equipment, but the actual work was entirely Marcus's responsibility. Halfway through the procedure, the ship's communication system activated, filling the chamber with a harmony of crystalline tones that Marcus recognized as an incoming transmission. "Greetings, vessel of the Star-Touch Sept," came a voice that sounded like wind chimes made of precious metals. "I am Resonance of Growing Things, speaking for the crystalline hegemony. We request permission to board and offer our assistance with your medical difficulties." Zathrai, immobilized by the partially completed surgery, could only listen as Marcus continued his work. "We have detected the use of primitive medical technology aboard your vessel," the crystalline voice continued. "Our bioengineers can offer solutions far more elegant than mechanical intervention. Please respond." Marcus's hands remained steady as he made the final connections between the optical device and Zathrai's neural pathways. "You don't have to answer," he said quietly. "They are persistent," Zathrai replied. "My people have dealt with the crystalline hegemony before. They view all biological systems as potential improvements to be made." Another transmission activated, this one carrying the mechanical precision of the Synthesis Collective. "Dragon Vessel, your biotechnological systems represent significant research opportunities. We propose a cultural exchange that would benefit both our species. Please prepare for boarding procedures." "Getting crowded out there," Marcus muttered, checking the device's power levels. The optical sensors were online, the neural interfaces were properly connected, and the quantum translation matrix was running within acceptable parameters. Ready for activation? Zathrai took what might have been a deep breath, though Marcus wasn't entirely sure how dragon respiratory systems worked. "I have been ready for 400 years. Marcus initiated the startup sequence, watching as power flowed through the device's circuits and into Zathrai's neural pathways. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the dragon's entire body went rigid, muscles tensing as alien sensations flooded through nervous systems that hadn't processed visual data in centuries. The ship's core flared brighter, its crystal branches pulsing with renewed energy as the dragon's enhanced perceptions fed back into the vessel's bio-neural networks. Light patterns danced along the walls, and Marcus could swear he felt the ship itself awakening from some deep dream. Zathrai's eyes, clouded with blindness for 400 years, suddenly blazed with golden light. "I can see," the dragon whispered, voice filled with wonder and disbelief. "Marcus Chen, I can see." But what Zathrai saw first wasn't the ship's central chamber or Marcus's grinning face. The enhanced optical sensors were connected to the ship's external arrays, and through them the dragon perceived something that made those ancient features harden with alarm. "4 ships, Zathrai said, rising from the medical chair with fluid grace. "No, 5. And the 5th," the dragon's head turned toward Marcus, golden eyes blazing. "The 5th carries the quantum signature of the Devourers." Marcus didn't recognize the name, but he didn't like the way Zathrai said it. "That doesn't sound good." "The Devourers are what remains of the Void Hunters," Zathrai explained, moving to what appeared to be a control interface grown directly from the ship's crystalline structure. They consume technology, absorbing and corrupting it for their own purposes. They were the reason my people withdrew from galactic affairs centuries ago."
As if summoned by the conversation, a new transmission filled the chamber.
This voice was different from the others, older, colder, carrying harmonics that seemed to reach directly into Marcus's brain and twist his thoughts toward despair. "Star-touched Sept vessel, you will submit to boarding and inspection. Your biotechnological systems have been claimed under Harvesting Protocol 7. Resistance will result in immediate extraction of all useful components." The transmission cut off, leaving the chamber in tense silence. "Extraction?" Marcus asked. "They will tear the ship apart to understand how it works," Zathrai replied. Golden eyes now focused on displays that Marcus couldn't see but could sense through the dragon's growing agitation. "And they will do the same to me." He'd spent 3 days building a miracle out of spare parts, had successfully restored sight to a being that the galaxy's greatest medical lines had declared beyond help. He wasn't about to let some cosmic scavengers undo all that work. "Can this ship fight?" he asked. Zathrai turned to look at him, and for the first time, Marcus saw the dragon smile with something approaching predatory satisfaction. "Marcus Chen, my ship was built during the Void Wars. It was designed to fight." The core's light intensified, crystal branches pulsing with energy that made the entire ship hum with barely contained power. Through the enhanced sensors, Marcus could perceive the other vessels maneuvering around Nexus Station. The elegant curves of the crystalline ship, the geometric precision of the synthesis vessel, and something else that his human brain struggled to process. The Devourer ship wasn't built so much as grown, its hull a shifting mass of absorbed technologies welded together by hunger and malice. It had consumed dozens of other vessels, incorporating their systems into a hybrid nightmare that defied every principle of engineering Marcus understood. "They're powering weapons," Zathrai announced, those golden eyes tracking energy patterns across multiple dimensional layers. "All of them. This will not be a diplomatic encounter." Marcus checked his toolkit, mentally cataloging every spare part and jury-rigged component he had available. Human engineers weren't trained for space battles, but they were trained to solve problems under pressure with whatever materials were at hand. "What do you need?" he asked. Zathrai looked at him with an expression of surprise and growing respect. "You would stay? You could evacuate to the station before the fighting begins. I didn't spend 3 days building you new eyes just to watch someone else tear you apart. What do you need?" For the first time in 400 years, Zathrai of the Star-touched Sept saw clearly, and what the dragon saw was a human grease monkey standing in the heart of an ancient warship, surrounded by spare parts and impossible devices, ready to fight the galaxy's most advanced civilizations with nothing but determination and ingenuity. It was, Zathrai reflected. "Then let me show you," the dragon said. "What happens when human innovation meets dragon fury?" The ship's core blazed with light as systems that had slumbered for centuries awakened to the touch of enhanced perceptions. Around Nexus Station, 5 warships maneuvered for position, their crews unaware that they were about to learn a hard lesson about underestimating human determination. Marcus Chen, Grease Monkey, and Miracle Worker was about to give them a demonstration in the art of the impossible. The first shot came from the Devourer ship, a writhing beam of energy that carved through space and slammed into Nexus Station's outer hull. Alarms blared throughout the station as emergency bulkheads sealed and atmosphere rushed to escape through a hull breach the size of a transport shuttle. Marcus felt the dragon ship shudder as Zathrai engaged systems that had been dormant for centuries. The core's light intensified, and suddenly the chamber was filled with holographic displays that showed the tactical situation around the station. 5 ships hung in space like predators circling wounded prey, their weapons powered and targeting systems active. "They're not going to negotiate," Marcus observed, watching energy readings spike across multiple displays. "The Devourers never negotiate," Zathrai replied, those golden eyes now blazing with patterns of light that matched the ship's awakening systems. "They consume, they absorb, they move on. It is their nature." Through the ship's enhanced sensors, Marcus could see the crystalline hegemony vessel repositioning itself. Unlike the other ships, it wasn't powering weapons. Instead, it was extending what looked like biological tendrils toward the station's hull. "What are they doing?" he asked. "Attempting to board through biomechanical breach," Zathrai explained, hands moving across control surfaces that responded to touch like living tissue. "They will try to secure the station's population before the Devourers can harvest them." Marcus felt sick. He'd been so focused on the technical challenge of restoring Zathrai's sight that he hadn't considered the human cost of attracting galactic attention. Nexus Station housed nearly 3,000 people, mechanics, traders, families who had made their homes among the stars. Now they were all in danger because he'd decided to help a blind dragon. "We have to protect them," he said. Zathrai's head turned toward him, those enhanced eyes studying Marcus with new understanding. "You feel responsibility for this situation. I brought you here. I performed the surgery that lit up every sensor in 3 sectors. This is happening because of what I did." Marcus moved to what appeared to be a secondary control station, his engineer's instincts telling him it was some kind of power management system. "Can we get them out? The station has no significant defensive capabilities and insufficient evacuation craft," Zathrai replied. "But this ship—" The dragon paused, and Marcus could see new data flowing across the holographic displays. This ship was built to fight impossible odds. In the sudden silence that followed, Marcus could hear the distant sound of emergency broadcasts echoing through the station's corridors. "They're cutting off our ability to call for help," he realized. Help would not arrive in time regardless, Zathrai said. But there was something else in that musical voice now, a note of anticipation that made Marcus think of storms gathering on a distant horizon. But perhaps help is not what we need. The dragon ship detached from Bay 12 with fluid grace, its biocrystalline hull rippling as it emerged into open space. Through the enhanced sensors, Marcus could see the other vessels reacting with surprise and alarm. The crystalline ship's biomechanical tendrils whipped back toward their hull, while the synthesis vessel reconfigured its weapons arrays to track the new threat. The Devourer ship, however, simply turned toward them like a hungry predator finally spotting its preferred prey. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself and prepare for harvesting," came that cold, terrible voice. "Your biotechnological systems will be incorporated into our collective consciousness. Resistance will only delay the inevitable." Zathrai's response came not in words, but in actions. The ship's core blazed with light that Marcus could feel in his bones, and suddenly space around them filled with energy patterns that made his human brain struggle to process what he was seeing. It was like watching mathematics come alive, geometric forms that folded through dimensions his species had never evolved to perceive. The first salvo from the dragon ship didn't look like weapons fire in any conventional sense. Instead, it resembled a cascade of crystalline butterflies, each one carrying enough energy to power a small city. They swarmed toward the Devourer vessel in patterns that seemed almost playful, dancing around the larger ship's defensive fire. When they struck, the result was spectacular. The Devourer's hybrid hull, composed of technology stolen from dozens of civilizations, began to unravel as the dragon weapon interfaced with each system in turn. Hull plating designed by the vegan shipwright suddenly remembered its original programming and tried to reconfigure itself. Crystalline components from conquered hegemony vessels began growing in directions their creators never intended. Synthesis machinery started attempting to merge with incompatible systems. The Devourer ship was being forced to digest itself. "How did you do that?" Marcus asked, watching the enemy vessel writhe in space as its own absorbed technologies turned against it. "Dragon weapons do not destroy," Zathrai explained, hands dancing across control surfaces that pulsed with living light. "We restore. We remind stolen technology of its original purpose, its intended harmony. The Devourer's strength becomes their weakness." The crystalline hegemony ship responded by extending its biomechanical tendrils again, but this time toward the dragon vessel. Marcus watched in fascination and growing alarm as the organic structures reached across space, each one tipped with what appeared to be some kind of interface node. "They're trying to connect directly to your ship," he realized. "A mistake," Zathrai replied. but Marcus could hear something like approval in the dragon's voice. They believe their biotechnology is superior to ours. They are about to learn otherwise. When the crystalline tendrils made contact with the dragon ship's hull, the result was immediate and startling. Instead of interfacing with the ship's systems, the tendrils began to change, their crystalline structure shifting to match the biocrystalline patterns of the dragon vessel. Light flowed along the connections, carrying information at speeds that made Marcus's head spin. Through the enhanced sensors, he could perceive what was happening on a quantum level. The crystalline hegemony's bioengineers had designed their systems to absorb and improve upon any biological technology they encountered. But dragon biotechnology operated on principles that their creators had never imagined. The crystalline ship was trying to improve upon perfection, and the effort was tearing its systems apart from the inside. "Impossible," came a voice filled with crystalline harmonies and growing panic. "Our biomatrices are failing, systems are rejecting optimization protocols. How is this possible?" The synthesis collective vessel, apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor, began powering up its hyperdrive. But Zathrai was already moving to intercept, the dragon ship flowing through space with liquid grace. "They carry information about our encounter," the dragon explained. "Such knowledge could be dangerous in the wrong hands." Marcus watched as the dragon ship released another swarm of crystalline constructs, but these moved differently, less like butterflies and more like schools of fish, flowing around the synthesis vessel in complex patterns that seemed to pulse with mathematical precision. When they struck, the effect was subtler than what had happened to the Devourer ship. The synthesis vessel didn't writhe or tear itself apart. Instead, it simply stopped. Its engines went dark, its weapons powered down, and its hull became perfectly reflective, like a mirror floating in space. "What did you do to them?" Marcus asked. "Showed them perfection," Zathrai replied. "The synthesis collective seeks to merge organic and artificial consciousness into a single unified whole. I have given them exactly what they desired. Perfect unity, perfect harmony, perfect stillness." Through the ship's sensors, Marcus could perceive the synthesis vessel's crew, or what had been its crew. The boundary between organic and artificial had indeed been erased, but not in the way they had intended. Instead of becoming greater than the sum of their parts, they had achieved perfect equilibrium, a state so balanced and unified that no further action was possible or necessary. They had become living art, beautiful and eternal, and completely static. The fourth ship, which had been hanging back at the edge of the engagement, suddenly accelerated toward Nexus Station. Marcus realized with growing alarm that it was smaller than the others, built for speed rather than firepower. "Scout vessel," Zathrai identified. "It will carry word of this encounter to others of its kind." "Can we stop it?" "Not without leaving the station defenseless," the dragon replied, golden eyes tracking multiple tactical scenarios simultaneously. "And there are still threats that require our attention." As if summoned by those words, the Devourer ship lurched back into motion. Its hull was still writhing with uncontrolled technological growth, but something at its core had managed to reassert control. When it spoke again, that cold voice carried new harmonics of pain and rage. "You will pay for this insult, dragon. We will strip the flesh from your bones and incorporate your neural patterns into our collective suffering. Your human pet will experience eternity as a component in our pain engine." Marcus felt a chill at those words, but Zatharai's response was laughter, not the musical sound of normal dragon amusement, but something deeper and older, carrying harmonics that made space itself seem to ring like a struck bell. "You threaten a human under my protection," the dragon said, and suddenly the ship around them pulsed with energy that Marcus could feel in every cell of his body. "Do you know what humans call that?" The core blazed brighter than Marcus had ever seen it, crystal branches reaching maximum luminosity as the ship's full power came online. Through the enhanced sensors, he could perceive energy patterns that existed in more dimensions than human mathematics had names for. "A mistake," Zathrai finished, and the dragon ship became something that had never existed before. The perfect fusion of ancient biotechnology and human innovation. Marcus felt the change as his improvised optical device synchronized fully with the ship's systems. Suddenly he wasn't just a passenger or even a crew member. He was part of the ship itself, his human intuition and engineering instincts feeding directly into the vessel's tactical systems. The weapon they created together was unlike anything either of their species had ever built. It combined the dragon's ability to restore harmony with the human talent for creative improvisation, resulting in something that was both elegant and completely unpredictable. When it struck the Devourer's ship, the effect was immediate and startling. Instead of forcing the absorbed technologies to remember their original purposes, it gave them new ones, purposes that no sentient being would ever have chosen to implement. The weapon systems decided they were art installations. The engines determined that they were actually musical instruments and started composing symphonies that could only be heard in hyperspace. The communication arrays concluded that they were gardening equipment and began trying to plant songs in the vacuum of space. Within minutes, the Devourer's ship had transformed from a hybrid nightmare into something that looked like a cosmic joke, a vessel whose every system was dedicated to creating beauty instead of consuming technology. "Impossible," gasped that cold voice, now tinged with harmonics of confusion and something that might have been wonder. "Our systems they're making art. Why are our weapons making art?" "Because," Marcus said, his voice carrying through the ship's communication systems, "humans don't just fix things. We make them better." The crystalline hegemony vessel, still struggling with its own biotechnological revolution, sent one final transmission before its systems completed their transformation into something beyond its creator's wildest dreams. We withdraw our claim. The Dragon vessel and its unusual crew are beyond our ability to process. We require significant time to integrate these new biological paradigms into our understanding. As the surviving ships fled or transformed themselves into cosmic art projects, Marcus found himself alone with Zathray in the ship's central chamber. The core pulsed with gentle light, its crystal branches healthy and vibrant for the first time in centuries. Around them, the biocrystalline walls displayed scenes of space, stars and nebulae and distant galaxies, all seen through the enhanced perceptions that his improvised device had made possible. "It worked," Marcus said, hardly able to believe it himself. The whole crazy plan actually worked. Zathray turned those golden eyes toward him, and Marcus saw something there that took his breath away. Not just gratitude, but recognition. The dragon was seeing him clearly for the first time, perceiving not just his physical form, but the intentions and determination that had driven him to attempt the impossible. "Yes," Zathray said softly. "But I do not think either of us anticipated the full consequences of our success." Through the ship's sensors, Marcus could see new contacts appearing at the edge of the system. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace. Not just one or two, but dozens of them. The scout vessel had apparently gotten word out before the battle ended, and now it seemed like half the galaxy was coming to investigate. "Friends of yours?" Marcus asked hopefully. Zathray studied the approaching fleet, golden eyes analyzing energy signatures and quantum resonances with the full power of ancient dragon perception enhanced by human technology. "Some are," the dragon admitted. "Others are not. And a few," those enhanced eyes widened slightly, "a few are carrying signatures I have not seen for over 1,000 years." Marcus felt that familiar surge of stubborn determination. He'd already accomplished the impossible once today. If the galaxy wanted to make this more complicated, well, that just meant he'd have to get more creative. "Then I guess we better get ready to meet them," he said, rolling up his sleeves and reaching for his toolkit. "Good thing I brought extra spare parts." Zathrai's laughter filled the chamber, musical and warm and completely confident. Together, a human grease monkey and an ancient dragon had just rewritten the rules of what was possible. Whatever came next, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. With determination, ingenuity, and the absolute certainty that there was no problem that couldn't be solved with the right combination of spare parts and stubborn refusal to give up. The galaxy was about to learn that some gifts changed everything, and the greatest gift of all was the friendship between two beings who refused to accept that anything was impossible. The fleet that emerged from hyperspace around Nexus Station was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Dozens of ships representing civilizations from across the galaxy hung in space like a convention of the impossible. vessels that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, others that appeared to be carved from single massive crystals, and a few that seemed to be constructed entirely from controlled gravity fields. Through the dragon ship's enhanced sensors, Marcus could perceive details that would have been invisible to human eyes. Each vessel carried the quantum signature of its creators, and many of those signatures were older than human civilization itself. The architects of the first dawn, Zathrai identified golden eyes tracking energy patterns across impossible distances. The Time Weavers of Chronos Prime, the Void Shepherds who tend the spaces between realities. The dragon's voice carried notes of awe that resonated through the ship's biocrystalline structure. I have not seen such a gathering since the Council of Infinite Choices over 2 millennia ago. Marcus adjusted his toolkit, checking that his improvised repair equipment was secure. Something told him they were going to need every spare part and jerry-rig solution he could manage. "Let me guess," he said. "They're not here for the tourist attractions." The first communication came from a ship that looked like it had been grown from starlight itself, its hull shifting between states of matter and patterns that made Marcus's head ache. "Greetings, vessel of the star-touched sept," came a voice that sounded like cosmic wind through the bones of ancient mountains. "I am the echo of what might be, speaking for the temporal conclave. We have perceived disturbances in the quantum substrate that require investigation." Before Zathrai could respond, another transmission overlapped the first, this one carrying harmonics that seemed to exist in more dimensions than space should allow. "Dragon of the old ways, your actions have created ripples across 17-dimensional layers. The Probability Council demands an accounting of these causality violations." Then came a third voice, this one familiar and unwelcome, the cold tones of another devourer vessel, though this one was much larger than the ship they had recently converted into a cosmic art project. "Star-touch Sept vessel, you will submit to immediate harvesting. Your integration of primitive human technology with dragon biosystems represents a contamination that must be corrected. Prepare for forcible extraction." Marcus felt the dragon ship's systems responding to Zathrai's growing anger, the core's light intensifying as ancient weapons prepared for battle. But before the dragon could respond, something unexpected happened. A new transmission cut across all the others, carrying a voice that Marcus recognized with shock and growing amazement. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Deep Space Defense Force. All hostile vessels will stand down immediately or face the consequences. Chen, that's my sister," completed a familiar voice as Sarah Chen's face appeared on the ship's communication screen. She looked older than Marcus remembered, her hair gray at the temples and her face lined with the kind of stress that came from commanding warships in deep space. But her eyes were the same, determined, intelligent, and absolutely furious. "Hello, little brother," she said, her tone carrying the special kind of exasperation reserved for siblings who had managed to start galactic incidents. "Care to explain why half the Navy's sensor networks lit up like Christmas when you decided to perform unauthorized xenobiology experiments?" Through the ship's sensors, Marcus could now perceive the human fleet that had been hidden behind the larger alien vessels. They were smaller ships, built for function rather than cosmic grandeur, but they carried the quantum signatures of weapons that could crack planets. "How did you," Marcus began, "get here so fast?" Sarah's smile was razor sharp. "Marcus, you're my baby brother, and you have a talent for turning routine repairs into galactic incidents. I've had a task force on standby in case you needed rescue for the past 3 years." Zathrai leaned into the communication field, those golden eyes studying Sarah with interest. "Admiral Chen, your reputation precedes you. The Dragon clans remember the Battle of Centauri Gate?" Sarah's expression softened slightly. "And we remember the Star-Touch Sep's assistance during the Void incursion. It's an honor to speak with you directly, Zathrai of the Old Blood." Marcus looked between his sister and his alien friend, realizing that they shared a history he'd never known about. "Wait, you two know each other?" The human military and the dragon clans have had an understanding for several decades, Zathrai explained. We share certain enemies and certain principles regarding the protection of sentient life. The Devourer ship interrupted with another transmission, its cold voice now carrying overtones of irritation. This diplomatic posturing is irrelevant. The biotechnological contamination must be corrected. All vessels will withdraw or be incorporated into our processing matrix. Sarachen's response was immediate and uncompromising. Negative. The human vessel and its crew are under the protection of the Terran Defense Force. Any hostile action against them will be considered an act of war against the Earth Federation. The humans have no authority in this matter, responded another voice. This one carrying the crystalline harmonics of the Probability Council. The quantum violations created by the fusion of human and dragon technology threaten the stability of local spacetime. The contamination must be contained. Marcus felt a familiar surge of stubborn determination. He'd spent his entire adult life being told what wasn't possible, what couldn't be done, what was beyond human capability. Now some of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations were calling his greatest achievement a contamination that needed to be contained. Contamination? He said, his voice carrying through the ship's communication systems to the entire assembled fleet. You want to know what contamination looks like? Before anyone could stop him, Marcus moved to the ship's primary control interface, his hands dancing across biocrystalline surfaces that responded to his touch like living tissue. The optical device he'd built was still integrated with the ship's systems, and through it he could perceive the quantum patterns that connected all technology across the galaxy. Contamination looks like weapons that only know how to destroy, he said, highlighting the energy signatures of the Devourer vessels. Contamination looks like civilizations that claim ownership over other people's lives and technologies. His attention shifted to the Probability Council ships. Contamination looks like being so afraid of change that they'd rather destroy something new than try to understand it. The ship's sensors reached out across space, interfacing with every vessel in the fleet through quantum resonance patterns that Marcus was only beginning to understand. He wasn't trying to control or damage the other ships, he was simply showing them something they'd never seen before. This is what innovation looks like, he continued, and suddenly every ship in the fleet could perceive what he and Zathrai had created together. Not just the optical device that had restored the dragon's sight, but the deeper fusion of human and dragon technology that had occurred during the battle. It was beautiful in a way that transcended species boundaries. Human creativity merged with dragon wisdom, producing systems that were more than the sum of their parts. Technologies that didn't just function. They evolved, they adapted, they found new ways to serve their users' needs. The silence that followed lasted for nearly a minute. Then, one by one, responses began coming in from across the fleet. Impossible, whispered the temporal conclave ship. The quantum harmonics they're perfect. How did a human engineer achieve such elegant system integration? The biocrystalline matrices are operating at efficiency levels beyond our theoretical maximums, added the crystalline hegemony vessel, its crew apparently having recovered from their earlier technological revolution. This is not contamination, this is evolution. Even the Probability Council's representatives seemed shaken. The causality patterns are stable. More than stable, they're actively improving local quantum coherence. This shouldn't be possible. The Devourer ship's response was predictably hostile, irrelevant. All technology belongs to the collective. Prepare for immediate harvesting. But before the massive vessel could move, something extraordinary happened. The other Devourer ship, the one Marcus and Zathrai had converted into a cosmic art project during the earlier battle, suddenly came online again. When it spoke, its voice was completely different, warm and musical, and filled with wonder. No, it said, positioning itself between the harvester vessel and the dragon ship, we have experienced beauty. We have created instead of consumed. We will not return to the old ways. The converted ship's hull had stabilized into something that looked like a crystal sculpture come to life, its surfaces covered with patterns that shifted and flowed in response to cosmic radiation. Weapons that had once harvested technology were now creating light sculptures that danced between the stars. "Impossible," snarled the harvester ship. "You are part of our collective consciousness. You cannot refuse our directives." We're part of your collective," the converted vessel replied. "Now we are part of something greater. We choose to create rather than destroy, to give rather than take. This is what the humans call free will, and it is more intoxicating than any technology we have ever consumed." The harvester ship fired without warning, its weapons designed to strip technology from other vessels and incorporate it into its own hybrid systems. But the converted devourer was ready, its newly artistic systems responding with defensive measures that were as beautiful as they were effective. Instead of shields, it created barriers of crystallized music. Instead of armor, it generated protective fields made from crystallized mathematics. The harvester's weapons struck these defenses and were transformed, their destructive energy becoming part of an ever-growing symphony of light and sound. "This is what contamination really looks like," Admiral Chen said, her fleet moving to support the converted vessel. "It spreads. It changes things. And sometimes those changes are for the better." More ships began to move, taking sides in a confrontation that was becoming less about technology and more about fundamental philosophical differences. The architects of the First Dawn positioned themselves near the dragon ship, their ancient vessels humming with approval for the fusion of innovation and wisdom. The time weavers of Kronos Prime began temporal calculations that would protect the new technology from retroactive erasure. But the most surprising support came from an unexpected source. Unknown vessels came a new voice, this one carrying harmonics that Marcus recognized from his years working on archaeological expedition ships. "This is the research vessel, Eternal Curiosity of the Zenith Foundation. We claim academic privilege over the biotechnological innovations demonstrated by the star-touched SEP vessel." Through the sensors, Marcus could see the Zenith ship, a massive research platform that carried some of the galaxy's most brilliant scientists. The Foundation was known throughout the galaxy for their dedication to preserving and studying technological innovations. "The fusion of human and dragon biotechnology represents a breakthrough of historic proportions," the Zenith spokesperson continued. "Any attempt to suppress or harvest these innovations will be met with appropriate academic resistance." Marcus had never heard the phrase academic resistance spoken with such menace. The situation was rapidly spiraling beyond anyone's control. What had started as a simple rescue mission had become a philosophical battleground, with dozens of civilizations choosing sides based on their fundamental beliefs about technology, innovation, and the rights of sentient beings. At the center of it all sat the Dragon ship, its biocrystalline hull pulsing with light patterns that reflected the enhanced perceptions Marcus had made possible. Through his improvised optical device, he could perceive the quantum threads that connected every vessel in the fleet, the probability matrices that governed their interactions, the temporal cascades that would determine which future became reality. "Zathrai," he said quietly, "I think we might have started something bigger than we meant to." The dragon turned those golden eyes toward him, and Marcus saw something there that took his breath away. Not regret or fear, but anticipation. "Marcus Chen," Zathrai said, voice filled with the musical harmonics of deep satisfaction, "I believe that is exactly what we intended to do." Around them, the greatest fleet in galactic history prepared for a battle that would determine not just the fate of human-dragon cooperation, but the fundamental question of whether innovation and friendship could triumph over fear and possessiveness. Marcus checked his toolkit one more time, making sure he had everything he needed for whatever impossible repairs the coming battle might require. He was just a grease monkey with spare parts and stubborn determination, but he'd already accomplished one miracle today. If the galaxy wanted to see what else was possible when humans refused to accept limitations, he was ready to show them. The real fight was about to begin. The battle that followed would be remembered in galactic history not for the weapons fired or ships destroyed, but for what wasn't destroyed. In the end, it became less a fight and more a demonstration of the fundamental difference between creation and consumption. The Devourer harvester ship struck first, launching swarms of technological parasites designed to burrow into enemy vessels and strip them of useful components. But as these parasites encountered the quantum resonance field that Marcus and Zethrai had created together, something unprecedented happened. Instead of consuming the technology they touched, the parasites began to create. They interfaced with the dragon ship's biocrystalline systems and started generating new structures. Not weapons or shields, but something far more dangerous to the Devourer philosophy. Art. Beautiful, impossible art that served no practical purpose except to exist and be appreciated. What is happening to our consumption matrix? The harvester ship demanded, its cold voice now tinged with something approaching panic. The parasites are not harvesting. They are making things beautiful. Through his enhanced connection to the ship's sensors, Marcus could perceive what was happening on a quantum level. The fusion of human creativity and dragon harmony wasn't just affecting their own vessel, it was spreading, touching every piece of technology in the fleet and giving it new possibilities. Crystalline hegemony biosystems that had been designed for efficiency suddenly discovered aesthetics. Synthesis collective machines that had pursued perfect unity began exploring the beauty of controlled chaos. Even the cold precision of temporal conclave time manipulation technology started creating patterns that were mathematically perfect and completely unnecessary. It's not contamination, Marcus realized, speaking to the assembled fleet through the dragon ship's communication systems. It's inspiration. All human vessels, defensive formation around the dragon ship. Let's show them how we protect our own. The human fleet moved with practice coordination, their smaller vessels darting between the massive alien ships like fighters protecting a bomber. But their weapons weren't firing. Instead, they were transmitting data packages that contained the technical specifications for dozens of human innovations. If you want to study human-dragon cooperation, Sarah announced to the fleet, you might as well see what we can do separately first. The data packages spread through the assembled vessels carrying information about human engineering principles and the kind of creative problem-solving that had allowed Marcus to restore sight to a dragon with spare parts and determination. The effect was immediate and startling. Ships that had hung in space for millennia as static monuments to their creator's vision suddenly began to evolve, their systems adapting and improving in ways their original designers had never imagined. The Zenith Foundation research vessel was the first to openly embrace the changes, its hull reconfiguring itself to accommodate new laboratories and observation decks. Fascinating, came the excited voice of their lead researcher. Human innovation principles are causing cascade improvements across multiple technological paradigms. We must document everything. But not everyone was pleased with the spreading wave of creativity. This chaos must be contained, declared the Probability Council representative, their ship's weapons charging with energy designed to collapse quantum possibilities back into predictable patterns. The causality violations are spreading exponentially. Reality itself is at risk. The weapon they fired was unlike anything in conventional arsenals. Instead of energy or projectiles, it launched pure entropy, a wave of quantum collapse that would force all affected systems back to their original, unmodified states. Marcus felt the wave approaching through the dragon ship's enhanced sensors, a tide of enforced normalcy that would undo everything he and Zethrai had accomplished together. In desperation, he reached out through his optical interface, trying to find some way to protect not just their ship, but all the innovations that were spreading through the fleet. What he found instead was something he hadn't expected: help. The converted Devourer ship, now a living work of art, interposed itself in the entropy wave's path. But instead of being collapsed back to its original state, something extraordinary happened. The ship's new artistic systems treated the entropy wave as raw material, weaving it into patterns that were both chaotic and beautiful. We choose beauty over order, the converted vessel declared, its hull now shifting through impossible colors that existed only in the spaces between normal electromagnetic wavelengths. We choose creation over consumption, growth over stagnation, hope over certainty. The time weavers of Chronos Prime wove temporal loops that turned the entropy wave into a cascade of possibility. The architects of the First Dawn used their reality-shaping technology to build structures from pure quantum foam, giving form to concepts that had never existed before. Even some of the crystalline hegemony vessels joined in, their biosystems reaching out to embrace the chaos and transform it into new forms of life. But the most remarkable response came from an unexpected source. The asteroid base that had been Marcus's home for 8 years suddenly came alive with energy patterns that matched the dragon ship's biocrystalline matrix. Through his enhanced perceptions, Marcus could see what was happening. The human crews throughout the station were improvising solutions to the crisis using the same principles he'd applied to Zathrai's optical systems. Dock workers were jury-rigging the station's life support systems to create harmonic resonance fields. Engineers were turning maintenance robots into mobile art installations. Even the cantina staff were using their food synthesizers to create edible sculptures that somehow stabilized local spacetime. "My God," Admiral Chen whispered, her voice carrying wonder and pride in equal measure. "They're all doing it. The whole station is becoming a work of art." Nexus Station's transformation was the tipping point. As the asteroid base began to pulse with the same biocrystalline patterns as the Dragon ship, every vessel in the fleet found itself connected to a network of creativity and cooperation that spanned species boundaries. The Devourer Harvester ship, faced with an entire fleet that had chosen creation over consumption, finally broke. "Impossible!" it transmitted, its cold voice now cracking with something that might have been desperation. "Technology exists to be consumed, to be incorporated, to serve the collective. It cannot simply create for the sake of creation." "But it can," Marcus replied, his words carrying through the quantum network that now connected every vessel in the fleet. "And it does." Every day, in every repair shop and engineering bay across the galaxy, people take broken things and make them work better than before. That's what technology is really for, not to serve some collective consciousness, but to help individuals achieve things they couldn't do alone. As if to prove his point, the converted Devourer ship began to sing. Its weapons systems, now repurposed as musical instruments, created harmonies that resonated across multiple dimensions. The sound was beautiful beyond description, carrying notes that touched the quantum substrate of reality itself. Other ships began to join the song. The crystalline hegemony vessels added biological rhythms that pulsed with the heartbeat of living worlds. The Synthesis Collective contributed mathematical harmonies that described the precise beauty of universal constants. Even the human fleet added their voices, their tactical computers generating beat patterns that somehow made the entire composition more human, more relatable. The Harvester ship's response was to fire everything it had, launching every technological parasite and entropy weapon in its arsenal. But instead of destroying the network of creativity that had formed around the Dragon ship, the weapons were transformed by it. Parasites became symbiotes that helped ship systems achieve new levels of efficiency. Entropy weapons became randomness generators that inspired new forms of artistic expression. Even the Harvester's attempt to crash the network with viral code resulted in poetry that spread from ship to ship, carrying verses about the beauty of cooperative creation. We cannot understand," the Harvester ship finally transmitted, its voice now small and lost. "How can you choose inefficiency? How can you prefer uncertainty to control, creativity to consumption?" It was Zathrai who answered, those golden eyes blazing with ancient wisdom enhanced by human innovation. "Because, child of the void," the dragon said gently, "consumption ends when there is nothing left to consume, but creation continues forever. Each new thing inspiring others to create something even more beautiful." The Harvester ship went silent for a long moment. Then, incredibly, something in its quantum signature began to change. We would like to try," it said hesitantly, "to create instead of consume. But we do not know how." Marcus found himself smiling, the same expression he'd worn years ago when a young engineer had asked him how to fix their first hyperdrive coupling. "That's okay," he said. "Nobody knows how at first. That's what makes it an adventure. What followed was the strangest teaching session in galactic history. A human grease monkey and an ancient dragon working together with crews from dozens of species helped a former world killer learn how to make art instead of war. They started simple, showing the harvester ship how to use its matter absorption systems to create sculptures instead of consuming raw materials. Then they moved on to more complex projects, teaching the former devourer how to turn its technological parasites into collaborative tools that helped other ships improve their own systems. By the end of the first day, the harvester ship had created its first original work of art, a delicate lattice of crystallized energy that served no purpose except to catch starlight and transform it into patterns of impossible beauty. The former devourer wept when it saw what it had made, tears of energy that fell through space like liquid starlight. "We understand now," it whispered. "We see why you choose creation over consumption. Beauty is? It is the only thing that increases when shared." Word of the Nexus Station incident, as historians would later call it, spread across the galaxy within days. Reports of human engineers teaching ancient civilizations how to turn weapons into art installations, of dragon biotechnology inspiring new forms of cooperative creation, of an entire fleet choosing beauty over conflict. The effects rippled outward for decades. The crystalline hegemony began incorporating human engineering principles into their biosystems, creating living machines that could adapt and improvise. The Synthesis Collective started studying the balance between order and chaos that made human-dragon cooperation so effective. Even the Probability Council began to appreciate the beauty of uncertain outcomes. And at the center of it all, Marcus Chen continued to work in his repair bay on Nexus Station, fixing broken things and making them better. But now his workshop was visited by beings from across the galaxy. Scientists and artists, engineers and philosophers, all wanting to understand the principles behind the miracle he'd accomplished with spare parts and stubborn determination. Zathrai became a regular visitor, the dragon's golden eyes now able to perceive wonders that had been hidden for 4 centuries. Together, they worked on increasingly ambitious projects, fusing human creativity with dragon wisdom to solve problems that neither species could have handled alone. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked one day as they collaborated on a new type of faster-than-light communication system that would work by creating art across interstellar distances. "Getting involved with a crazy human and his junkyard medicine?" Zathrai paused in their work, those enhanced eyes studying Marcus with an expression of deep contentment. "Marcus Chen," the dragon said, voice filled with the musical harmonics of absolute certainty. "You gave me back my sight. But more than that, you showed me that the greatest gift any being can offer is the chance to become more than what they were before." Through the workshop's windows, Marcus could see the fleet that had become a permanent fixture around Nexus Station. Ships from dozens of species, their crews working together on projects that none of them could have imagined alone. The converted Devourer vessel had become a traveling art gallery spreading beauty and inspiration to worlds that had forgotten what creation looked like. The Zenith Foundation had established a permanent research station to study the ongoing fusion of different technological paradigms. And somewhere in the deep void, more ships were coming, drawn by reports of a place where ancient enemies had learned to work together, and where a human grease monkey had proven that the greatest miracles came from the willingness to help someone else achieve their dreams. Marcus picked up his toolkit, checking that his spare parts and improvised solutions were ready for whatever impossible repair job would walk through his door next. He was still just a human engineer working on the edge of known space. But now he understood something that changed everything. The universe wasn't a machine that occasionally broke down and needed fixing. It was a work of art in constant creation, and every being in it had the opportunity to contribute something beautiful to the ongoing masterpiece. Some gifts, he reflected as he got back to work, really did change everything. And the best gifts were the ones that kept giving, inspiring others to create their own miracles. In the end, that was the most human thing of all, the absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible and the determination to prove it by making the impossible happen with spare parts, stubborn creativity, and the simple willingness to help. The galaxy would never be the same, and Marcus Chen couldn't have been happier about that if he'd tried.